I got to see tens of thousands of opportunities and invested a lot of money over that time. And what I understood about investing at the time was that investing is about access. It comes down to the entrepreneur. It comes down to the resilience. Companies don't die. Founders give up. And I saw thousands and thousands of them. And over time, what you start to understand, or sitting on boards or speaking to founders of companies, CEOs of companies, you start to develop a framework for what you believe is a successful company.
Welcome to Masters of Change. Today, I sit down with Feras Jalbout, founder and CEO of Baraka, an investment platform on a mission to educate and empower regional retail investors. Today, we will discuss business scaling, investments, and product development. Enjoy the conversation. So for us, let's talk about the founding story of Baraka.
So Baraka was founded after a 15-year career in investment management that I had. I spent the first 10 years working at private banks and wealth management. And the last 5 years at a family office, investing capital on their behalf, and very diversified set of opportunities. And I got to see tens of thousands of opportunities and invested a lot of money over that time. And what I understood about investing at the time was that investing is about access, and so providing access to people, giving access to people, became fundamental to the mission. So I became very driven by the opportunity to get more people to invest. And then, apart from that, I was I've been in the region now 15 years, but I had been using applications, investment apps that aren't built for the region. And I didn't like using them, to be quite honest with you. And I felt like I could build something that would resonate with a local audience a lot better than, the international apps that were out there. And so that became fundamental to the mission: is can we build something here that allows more people to invest and gives them kind of broader access and better content and things that are more relevant for them. And so it became kind of the mission, is to create something that's from the region for the region, to give more people access to investing.
Interesting. So obviously, Baraka is for the region. During your research and initial product design, right, and looking to validate the concept as well, what were the key issues and differences that you found that the product needs to address for it to be for the region?
Well, so there's several different things, and I think one of them is, they could become quite simple, but also, very complex. And so one of the things that we tried to address very early on was the idea of providing local content. And so that was very important to people, that we covered the stories that mattered here on the ground, not the stuff that happens in Western markets, because people are, partly concerned about that, but more concerned about what's happening in the local arena. And so we launched initially, before we got our first license, we launched as a newsletter. And to this day now, we have about 40,000 active readers on a daily basis. We're reaching the whole region, and we're producing content that resonates with people. It's about local stories that matter. And so that was one of the things that we did differently from the very beginning. I think some of the other points that really mattered to people is that they could access the app in Arabic, they could use local currency. We offer products that, for Islamic investing, like a Sharia filter or a dividend purifier. These are the small things that really matter to people. And so we'll continue to develop that over time to continue to build a localized solution that caters to people's needs.
Obviously, you've spent all of your professional career in investments. Yeah. So making a leap of faith into becoming a founder must have been a calculated decision.
Yes.
How did you go about validating the initial concept before making the move?
Well, so in my last role, I was at a family office and I was investing, and I got to see a lot of companies in the region. So I got to invest in a lot of companies in the region, and I got to invest in a lot of various opportunities from around the world. And so what I was seeing was there was a shift. There was a trend that was happening, in the West that I got to invest in, but wasn't necessarily reaching us here in the Middle East at the time. And so it was around fintech. And so what I realized was that there was a lot of money going into fintech, B2C fintech. There's a lot of opportunity that seemed to be emerging, but it wasn't reaching us here. So driven by my own mission to kind of find a platform that I could invest in that provided the things that I needed, I just felt like nobody was paying enough attention to that opportunity at the time. And so, looking at other markets, I saw, look, something's happening in other markets. We're probably behind a few years in fintech, and I just don't have the right product here. And so these two things were kind of part of the validation process. But other than that, I mean, I spent 3 or 4 months really doing a lot of research, talking about the problem with a lot of people, getting feedback, validating that way. And I think that's the best way to start, doing a lot of research and speaking to as many people as possible.
You're very knowledgeable and very passionate about investments.
Yes.
If someone kind of maybe is just looking to start their investment journey, what would be your 3 to 5 top tips what they should do?
Well, look, honestly, I don't want to give investment advice, but I think it's just about getting started. I think a lot of people have this inertia, this kind of like this fear of what if I lose money, and what if this happens, what if that. But quite honestly, I mean, they really just need to get over that. And with a platform like ours, you can start with a very small amount of money, $50. You probably spend $50 on a meal, on a couple of coffees, you can start with a small amount of money, see how it goes, get comfortable, try the app, try any kind of investment platform, and then build over time. But I think it's really just about getting started, and then keep it simple. Some people like to trade a lot. Some people, but other people who want to invest for a long period of time, you just need to buy systematically over a long period of time. And so, again, not investment advice, but if you look at the S&P 500 over the last 30 or 40 years, if you just bought the ETF that tracks the index, that's made 10% a year for the last 3 decades. It's pretty substantial. That compounds over time. And so one of the things that we're trying to teach people is that invest systematically. Just keep doing it on a monthly or quarterly basis, and diversify. And there's a compounding effect to your money that you may not realize. And if you're expecting it to compound over 1 or 2 years, I mean, unlikely that will happen. But if you expect it to compound over 20 or 30 years, that will be a substantial amount of money if you do it the right way. You just have to, you have to be patient. You have to have a long-term view.
So one of the things that I heard quite a few people becoming overwhelmed that it comes to investment
Correct.
is the number and names of different products. ETFs, stocks, bonds.
There's lots.
What's the best way to educate someone about it? What is Baraka doing for
Look,
this element of education?
Right, just like everything else, right? You've got to do a little bit of research. You don't have to do a ton of research, but there's a lot of free content online, and we produce a ton of it. And a big part of our strategy is to try to get people to spend a little bit of time on learning about investing. So again, this newsletter has daily stories, but at the bottom you have a learning section. You have a learn section, and on our website you have a learn section. And so we produce this content to get people more comfortable with investing. And so it's not about, choosing between 10,000 different stock symbols. It's really about, ultimately you realize that it's a handful, and you just got to get started and do it, invest systematically over time. But really, again, it's like everything else. You gotta do a little bit of research, and talk to people, and you'll get there.
So obviously, you're concentrating on the region.
Yeah.
What's the status quo, in your opinion, of financial literacy in the region?
Look, I think that it's not something that's taught in schools, right? It's not something that's been institutionalized. And what I mean by that is, if you look at other markets like, the US or Europe or the UK or whatever, investing is institutionalized. So we talk about financial literacy, but investing is institutionalized. And what I mean by that is, everybody has a pension. Everybody knows that a part of their paycheck gets taken away and put into a long-term investment plan. And what happens because of that is that people start to, ask questions, or they research that, or they start to understand that, part of their money is in the markets, and they start to develop a little bit of knowledge around how the markets work. And I think that's the fundamental, the base layer. And so that's not necessarily how things have evolved here, but that is how they're starting to shape up here. And that's what creates a great opportunity, is that we are just starting to institutionalize this way of investing. And so people have become more and more interested in it. And there's a lot of government initiatives now that are pushing financial literacy onto the local population, which I think is incredibly valuable. And so the next 10 years will be fantastic, because more and more people will be interested in their financial literacy, and will learn. And I think that shapes a society, that creates a lot of opportunity, and that creates a lot of stability. And so the next 10 years will be fundamental for financial literacy.
Currently, you offer a range of functionalities. How has your product development evolved as the business grew and scaled?
Well, I mean, it's constantly evolving, and it will continue to evolve. And probably the first product that we launched is wildly different to what the product is now, and it's gotten a lot better over time. And it will continue to get better. And I think the way that we continuously do that is that, we work a lot with our core team about the user interface and the user experience, and the way that we try to develop that and make it, easy to use, is that we speak to customers as much as possible. So I'll do customer calls, I'll do customer interviews. People, will get calls from me or emails requesting time, and we get a lot of feedback, and we try to incorporate that in our product development. And it takes time. It takes several iterations, but it's a fundamental part of how we build our product.
So obviously, for any product to be used, it requires a little bit of change from the end consumer side. And in addition to recruiting a user, you also need to make sure they stick through the lengthy but needed process of onboarding personal data. How has your customer onboarding changed from the first 10, first 100, thousands, hundreds of thousands now?
Well, I mean, it's definitely evolved, and we've gotten better over time. But the first thing I'll say is that we're a regulated financial institution. We're regulated by the Dubai Financial Services Authority. We process data in accordance with their framework. And so these things are fundamental for us. We transmit data through encrypted technology. This is the core of what we do, and then we build around that, essentially. And so, we try to look at how people onboard and fix things over time. And then as new technologies arise, like UAE Pass, for instance, we're one of the first regulated institutions in the UAE to integrate with UAE Pass. And that allowed us basically seamless onboarding. And you can now onboard using UAE Pass within a minute. So, coupled with these kind of interesting government initiatives, technology initiatives, I think that things will continue to evolve and be more accessible and easier to use and simpler. So it's an evolving process.
But I'm very curious to learn more about your personal, as a CEO and founder, framework. I was like, what does it take to get the first 100 users? And how has your operations changed because it's dramatically different?
Yes. I mean, the first 100 users, you're calling friends and family, and you're asking people to try things and, give you feedback and so on. I think that everybody should start this way, because you want to test with people that essentially. That's the first 100. The first 1,000 is wildly different, and the next 10,000 and the next 100,000, changes. You've got to build for scale at that point. So it really changes over time. I mean, the nice thing about what we've done is we were able to grow organically for a long period of time, and basically, by word of mouth, and people started to find us. And so, we don't have to call people anymore. It's luckily we've evolved from that level, but yeah, it will continue to evolve over time.
So you have many years of experience in investments.
Yeah.
You also continue to invest on an angel level. How do you think this experience has shaped what kind of founder and CEO you are?
So I was really fortunate to be an investor for a long period of time. And the thing is with investing is that you get to see a lot of investment opportunities. And so the ones that I saw varied in scope and geography, different sectors, and I saw thousands and thousands of them. And over time, what you start to understand, or sitting on boards or speaking to founders of companies, CEOs of companies, you start to develop a framework for what you believe is a successful company. And so I got to do that a lot before I started my own. So I got to, learn basically from various people, and by studying various companies, about the things that I felt were fundamental to the success of a company. And so I got to take that into building my own company. And so some of the things that I thought were incredibly important were, particularly when we were building a B2C company, is the product. The product has to be really good, and it has to, in the way that you develop the product, has to kind of resonate with the local market. So, for instance, we speak to customers a lot. We do a lot of customer interviews. I still do customer interviews, and I still ask people for feedback, and we take that and we put it into our product development plan. And we try to iterate on it. We try to develop something that people really want, and I think that's fundamental. That's one of the things that I've learned from working with successful CEOs and founders, and investing in successful companies, and how product focused they are. And so that's definitely something that we've taken into consideration when building Baraka, and we continue to be incredibly product focused. That's one thing. Other than that, I mean, some lessons that you learn over time. How to be frugal, not overinvest, basically, manage finances. It's a long journey, company building, and you have to kind of, you have to manage accordingly. And so, I've seen the success and the failures of several investments in several companies. And so I've, been able to take a couple of these lessons and hopefully avoid them.
What are the one main lesson that you've taken?
Well, quite honestly, I mean, I learned this when we were in YC, and this was the big lesson of YC, was essentially that, company building is a long journey. It takes a decade or more, and it's really about resilience. You just keep going. And, their famous, one of the famous sayings that they have is that companies don't die, founders give up. And so it's really how much resilience that you have, and how many, what you call shots on goal. And the shots on goal are basically how fast you can iterate, because it's really about finding this product market fit, and that just requires you to listen to your customers, iterate on the product, and keep going through that process until you have something that really starts scaling. And that's what it's all about. I mean, it's really just about constantly doing it, and that's how we built. That's how we're building our company.
Sharing that makes it sound relatively easy.
It's very hard.
Was there, obviously, YC Combinator is a renowned accelerator. Was there anything else that you took out from the program and learned during the program that you didn't expect?
There were several things, but I think the thing that I didn't expect was the point around resiliency, and the point, what was really powerful with YC is that when you do the program, you hear from other companies, very successful companies, and they come and do presentations. And so some of the companies are Airbnb and Stripe and Coinbase, and these are multi-billion-dollar companies, and you hear from the founders directly, and they're telling you about their journey and how many times they almost went out of business, and how many times, now you look at Airbnb, it's a multi 10, how many billions of dollars. I don't know what their market cap is now, but it's substantial. And they almost went out of business several times, and it tells you about that. And so again, you realize it's really about resiliency. It's about kind of constantly working and developing something that, what you think people want, and constantly working through the pain, and through the troubles that you have as an entrepreneur. And then also the power of building a great network, being able to take advice, iterating on that advice, I think is fundamental. So yeah, these two things really stood out for me.
I've had that a lot of fellow co-founders in the cohort approached you, and you given them some business advice. Paired that with the experience of angel investing in previous years of experience. What are the things that you see founders struggle the most?
Look, I think the thing is, quite often it's about simply getting started. There's an inertia that people suffer when they're trying to get started, and some people just don't take that plunge, and they're constantly battling with should I, shouldn't I? And I think that you have to really take the plunge. That's the first thing. um, you get started. And if you follow this framework of kind of talking to your customers and understanding what they need and building a product that resonates with them, whatever you do, if as long as you've gotten started and you're following that framework, you'll probably reach some kind of outcome. But if you don't get started, then you don't give yourself a chance. But that's not to say that you should just jump in, right? Like we started the conversation about how I got started, and I spent a lot of time researching, and I spent a lot of time speaking to people, and I think that's very important. And I think my advice is basically that, spend some time, research, talk to people, get advice, and then when it's time to start, you got to start.
Because I've had a lot of people are going a little bit on the notion of before you go into starting a company, like 100% dedicate, not 100, probably 200% of your energy resources at the very beginning. Should at least have closed a first few sales or gotten some indication that someone's going to be buying something, whether it's a fake door test or anything. Are you pro that logic, or is it a lot more start and you'll figure out if you got the resourcefulness?
It really depends on the kind of product that you're selling and the opportunity that you're addressing. Sometimes that's not possible. In some cases, yes, you should try that. In some cases, it's just not possible. So it really depends on the opportunity. And it's tough for me to answer that because it really depends on the opportunity and the person's personal situation. That also really, really impacts how you get started.
Neither company nor personal growth journeys are linear. What has been the challenges in your personal growth journey, and how did you overcome them?
It's a good question. I mean, we've talked a lot about how I started as an investor, and as an investor, you don't necessarily operate a business, and operating a business and investing in a business are two fundamentally different things. And so for me, I came in with a wider lens on kind of strategy and the things that I felt that made a company successful. And I got to apply those to building my own company. But once you start operating, you don't realize that things just don't necessarily go the way that you have planned. And that's the feedback that's what you start to learn as an operator. And so my personal challenge has been operating and learning to operate, and all the things that come with that, hiring the right team and motivating them, and like building a real company.
You know what, I'm really curious. Yeah, you spoke so much about resilience.
Hmm?
Is there any mental tricks or any tricks that you have yourself that you stay at the top of your game?
I wouldn't say tips or tricks. I think, I'm lucky in that I can always self-motivate. And I think that's something that you develop over time. So I genuinely self-motivate a lot. And so I'm constantly pushing forward because I think that's partly because that I'm very, very passionate about this business and the mission that we have as a company. And it's really about solving a puzzle. Building a company is a puzzle or a set of puzzles, and you're really solving various pieces over time. And so I like that. I like the challenge that we have every day of just solving, small bits of this puzzle. And I'm really driven by trying to see the whole thing come together. And I realize it takes a long time, but that motivates me. That gets me excited. That keeps me going. And so if you're driven that way, you got to find this thing that makes you passionate enough to keep going, and build it brick by brick.
Wonderful. So as you know, the series is titled Masters of Change. What do you see the next wave of change coming, predominantly in the fintech space, and how are you planning to surf it?
Well, more broadly, I think the change is already upon us, but in the region and globally, actually, I mean, what we're seeing is now that, with the prediction over the next 10 years is that there's going to be a massive wealth transfer from one generation to another. And so it's predicted that $10 trillion will pass through, from the older generation to the next generation. I think we're well positioned for that. Building a company, building a product for people of the region, in a region that's particularly wealthy, where investing is just, becoming part of one's day-to-day life. I think we're well positioned for it. And that excites me. And so, that gives us a great opportunity to kind of capitalize on that change and to build a really foundations of a very strong company in the region.
Thank you very much for a very insightful conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
To everyone watching, hope this episode provides you valuable insights that will empower you to master the growth of your business. Visit entrepreneur.com for your daily dose of business news and expert advice. You will find this and all future episodes on Entrepreneur TV.